Here is the thing about blonde brows. They are one of the most underestimated challenges in this profession. You look at the client and think, oh, the brows are light, there is not much there. But the moment you start working, you realize there are layers of fine vellus hairs invisible until you prep the skin correctly, and every single one of them needs to go before you can even think about lamination. Today you are watching a full brow wax and the first step of lamination on a natural blonde, and I want to walk you through every decision I make and why. The first thing to do before any wax treatment is cleansing, and I do not mean a quick swipe with a cotton pad. I mean a proper degreasing cleanse that removes makeup, oil, any residue sitting on the skin and the hair. Why does this matter? Because wax does not grip well on oily or dirty surfaces. You will end up with patchy removal, broken hairs, and a result that looks uneven. With this client, we have mixed skin type, which means the T-zone area near the brows can get oily quickly, so the cleanse is thorough, and I make sure the brow hairs themselves are fully clean before I even open the wax. Now we move into wax. And with a blonde client, I always choose a hard wax that is specifically formulated for sensitive and delicate areas. The skin around the brows is thin. There is constant movement here, expressions, squinting, and the wrong wax will cause unnecessary irritation. Hard wax grips the hair, not the skin. That is the key difference from strip wax. You apply it, you let it set just slightly, and then you remove it in one clean motion. No pulling on the skin itself. With blonde clients, I am essentially working blind at first. The hairs are so fine and so light that you cannot always see exactly what you are removing. This is why I work in small, controlled sections, never trying to cover the whole brow at once. I start with the most visible strays, below the brow line, above it, and then I come in for the fine hairs between the main brow body. Each section gets individual attention. You know what I mean? It is almost like micro-detailing work rather than a broad sweep. One professional insight I want to share here: the direction you apply wax matters as much as the direction you remove it. You always apply in the direction of hair growth, and you always remove against it. If you mix these up, you risk breaking the hair at the surface rather than pulling it from the root, and then 2 weeks later, your client is back with stubble instead of clean skin. The removal should be fast, confident, and close to the skin, not lifting away from the face at an angle, but pulling back along the surface. By this point in the treatment, the brow shape is really starting to emerge. This is honestly one of my favorite moments, when you can see the architecture of the brow revealing itself under all that vellus hair. With a blonde client, it is especially satisfying because the transformation is dramatic, even though the hairs were nearly invisible at the start. The skin around the brow starts looking cleaner, more defined, and you get a real sense of what the final shape will look like once we are done with lamination. Now I am focusing on the detail zones, the nose bridge, the tails, the upper edge of the brow. These are areas where beginners tend to either overwax or miss entirely. The inner corner is tricky because the skin is thin and the hairs grow in multiple directions. I always stretch the skin gently with one hand while applying with the other. This gives you a flat, even surface to work on, and makes removal much cleaner and less painful for the client. Honestly, stretching the skin correctly is one of those techniques that takes practice but makes an enormous difference. A question I get asked a lot: how do you know when the wax is ready to remove? It should feel firm to the touch, slightly matte on the surface, but still have a tiny bit of flexibility, not completely hard and brittle. If it goes fully hard, it tends to break rather than lift cleanly. The timing depends on the room temperature and the wax formula, but generally you are looking at anywhere from 15 to 40 seconds. You develop a feel for it over time. Final passes with the wax, finishing the tails, checking symmetry between both sides. I comb through with a spoolie at this stage to see the real shape of the brows, because without combing them into place, you cannot accurately judge the balance. Symmetry is not about making both brows identical. Faces are not symmetrical. It is about creating visual harmony. One brow may naturally sit slightly higher. One may have more hairs in the tail. My job is to work with what the client has, not impose an artificial shape that fights their natural structure. Now we transition to the lamination. I am using the Zola system, and this is step 1, the activator. What this product does is it softens the disulfide bonds in the hair, essentially the structural bonds that hold the hair in its natural direction. Once those bonds are softened, we can physically redirect the hairs into the position we want, brushed up, fluffy, lifted. The product goes on generously over the entire brow, and then we let it sit. The exposure time varies depending on the hair type and thickness. With fine blonde hair, you have to be careful not to over-process. You want pliability, not damage. While the product sits, I check in evenly across the brow to make sure every hair is saturated. Any dry patches mean those hairs will not respond to the treatment, and I monitor the reaction, touching the hair gently with a dry cotton stick to test how it is responding. When the hair starts to feel soft and slightly stretchy rather than stiff, that is your signal. It is a tactile skill more than a timed one. You build this sensitivity over hundreds of treatments. So that wraps up part 1. We have shaped and cleaned the brows with wax, removed all the vellus hair that was breaking up the silhouette, and applied the first step of Zola lamination. The skin has some redness. That is completely normal after wax and will calm down within the hour. In part 2, we move into step 2 of lamination, fixation, and the final styling. If you want to see how the brows look fully finished, make sure you watch part 2. And if you have questions about working with blonde brows or the Zola system, leave them in the comments below.